Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. Tonight we have present
Buenas tardes,
directors
vamos a empezar
Hitler,
esta
Frady's,
reunión.
Ramirez, After, and
Tenemos a
myself,
la
meaning we have a
directora
quorum.
Ramírez,
Thank you to our interpreter Astrid. Would you please
Frady
share the
y yo también.
interpretation
Y tenemos
instructions with our
los servicios
participants,
de
and we can turn on the
interpretación para las
interpretation
personas que
function.
necesiten interpretación al español. Por favor, dirigirse a la parte baja de
Thank you.
la
The first business in order
pantalla
is the
para
approval
poder
of the
escoger su
agenda.
idioma.
Directors, are there any proposed changes to the
Primero vamos a
agenda?
empezar con la aprobación de la agenda de hoy.
Being none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Tengo una moción para aprobar la agenda
I move
como
that we
se ha
approve the
presentado.
agenda as presented.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Votamos para que se
Our
apruebe
next agenda
esta.
item is our opening
agenda.
celebrations and updates by
Ahora
Dr.
vamos a
Cole.
hablar sobre las
All
celebraciones
right.
y las
So just want to
actualizaciones de
start
la doctora
by
Cole.
thanking the
Quiero
parents
empezar
and celebrating the parents
agradeciendo a
and
los
families
padres
who
y
attended
celebrando a
Monday's
los
Glenwood
padres y las
Springs Directors
familias, las
Forum
personas que
that Director
atendieron al
Ramirez
foro que
hosted.
llevamos a cabo el día
It felt like
lunes
over
en la
probably 45,
biblioteca de
50
Glenwood.
parents invested
Tuvimos
significant
como
amounts of
45,
time. I
50
think probably the
personas que
average amount of time a
estaban
parent spent with us was somewhere in 4 to 5
invertidos en el
hours.
tema.
And it was really clear that
Estuvieron
the
ahí
families
casi
spent
de
a lot of
4 a 6
time
horas. Es
preparing
muy
their
claro que
thoughts,
hubieron muchas
connecting
personas
with
que
and
pasaron
collaborating
mucho
with other
tiempo
families,
preparándose para esa
and
reunión
then taking the time to
y
share their
se tomaron el
concerns and
tiempo para
questions with
compartir
Director
sus
Ramirez and me.
preocupaciones con la doctora
Really want to
Ramírez y
thank and
conmigo.
celebrate Director
Quiero
Ramirez and the
agradecer
Voces
y
Unidas team
celebrar
for
a
creating
la
this space
directora
for families to
Ramírez
come
y a
and feel
Voces Unidas
welcome
por
and
crear
safe
este espacio para que
and
las
comfortable
familias
to
lleguen
share.
y que las familias se
Again, just
sientan
want to celebrate
cómodas
the
al
families
compartir
who
sus historias.
took the
Quiero
time off
agradecer
of
a
a
las familias que se
busy
tomaron el
workday, I'm
tiempo
sure,
de un día muy
to
ocupado de
share. And it was
trabajo
really clear
para
that they are deeply
compartir
committed to
que
partnering
están
with our
completamente
schools, our
comprometidos
staff, our
con
leaders
asociarse con
to
las
really
escuelas,
strengthening
nuestros
the
empleados y
academic,
nuestros líderes para
social,
poder
and cultural
fortalecer
experiences of our
nuestras
students in our
experiencias, las
schools.
experiencias culturales de
It
los
was a real
estudiantes.
highlight. It was a real privilege to
Quiero
get to be
subrayar
part
también
of
que fue un
that
privilegio
listening and learning
poder haber
session. So really
escuchado
grateful for that.
y aprendí mucho de este día.
Also
Gracias
want to celebrate and
También
thank
quiero celebrar y agradecer
the Colorado State Board of Education, the Commissioner of
la
Education,
Junta
Susana
Ejecutiva
Cordova, and all the support staff from the
del
Colorado
Departamento de
Department of
Educación de
Education who
Colorado
are
y
hosting
el
their
Departamento
regular
de
meeting
Educación
today
del
and tomorrow
Estado
in
de
Glenwood
Colorado, que
Springs,
van a
but
estar
came
llevando
into town a day
hoy
early to
mañana
participate in a
llegaron,
basalt to parachute tour and a full day
vinieron acá
meeting
un día antes para poder
with
reunirse con
Warren School
nosotros
District, Garfield RE2, Garfield
con
16 were really
el
showed up with
distrito
staff and
RI1,
in planning. And so
RE2
just want to thank
y
the the
Garfield
State Board of Education,
16.
the commissioner and all the staff
Quiero
who
agradecerles también
we
a todos
started
los
off the day
empleados.
visiting the
Vamos a
district
empezar
office
el día
in Garfield
visitando
RE2. Then
la
we went to
oficina del
tour
distrito
Rifle
de
High
Garfield
School's
y
Career and
RE2
Technical
y
Education
vamos
Center.
por
That's
a
just
la
so
escuela
cool
de
what is happening there.
secundaria
Really
de
inspiring.
Rifle.
The team then moved,
El equipo
made their way up to the
después
Meadowood project, which was really
llegamos al
exciting to
proyecto
get to show
Meadowood,
off
que
all
es
the
muy
work that has
emocionante
led to
mostrar todo el
that
trabajo que ha
solution for teacher
conllevado
housing and recruitment and
y para
retention.
tener una
We came
solución
here to the
para
Roaring
las
Fork School
viviendas de
District
los
district office and
maestros
then finished the day at Bridges High
y
School.
luego
It was a
terminamos el día
really
en la
wonderful
escuela
opportunity for our teams
de
to share
secundaria
the strengths
Bridges.
and
Fue una
challenges that we
oportunidad
face
para
as rural
nosotros
mountain school
compartir
districts.
los
And so I want to thank all the
desafíos
board members
que
from
tenemos en
our
nuestro
school
distrito. Quiero
board,
agradecerte
board
a
members from
nuestros
RE2
los
who
miembros de la Junta
participated, and of
Directiva
course the state
y a
board and the
los miembros
commissioner who
de
participated in the day.
RE2 que
And
participaron y todos
also just really want
los
to
demás equipos que
lift
pudieron
up
llegar y participar.
the support and collaboration of the Garfield RE2 team that was
Quiero
really
agradecerles
helpful in
también
planning
el
and
apoyo de
the kind of
Garfield
leadership and
RE2
collaboration on making the day come
y
together.
también por su
And then
liderazgo y su
finally,
colaboración para
this can
poder llevar
be
esto a cabo.
for most of our employees,
Para la
especially our
mayoría de
largest
nuestros
group of
empleados,
teachers and school staff, this is a really
especialmente
quiet time
nuestro
of
grupo
year.
más grande,
But
los
other
maestros
departments,
y los
this is
administradores,
actually,
es un
they're
tiempo
heading
bastante
into their
callado
busiest
del año.
season
Para
of
otros
the summertime.
departamentos,
And so
ahorita
our
va a
facilities
ser
teams, especially
su
custodial,
estación más ocupada,
maintenance, our finance
especialmente
teams,
las
our
personas de
HR, they
mantenimiento,
are
de
all ramping
finanzas,
up right
de
now. This is a
recursos
really
humanos,
busy
todos ellos
summer
están
and a
trabajando,
busy
es
season for
un
them. So I just
verano
want to
muy
celebrate
ocupado.
and
Entonces
thank
quiero
those staff
celebrar y
members who
agradecerle a
lean
estos
in when
empleados
so many others
que
across the district kind of lean out
pueden
and
hacer
take
este
and
trabajo
are
mientras los
resting, that
demás
there's groups that are
toman
just
un
really
descanso.
ramping up in terms of
Hay
workload
grupos que
and
realmente están
deadlines
trabajando
and trying to
duro
get a
porque
lot of
tienen
work done
fechas límites y
while
tienen que terminar su
our
trabajo a
kids and our school
tiempo.
staff are on break. So
En lo
I
que
want to
nuestros
thank that
niños
crew.
y
That's all I got.
nuestros empleados de las
Thank you.
escuelas están libres por
Our
el
next
verano.
business
Quiero
in order
agradecerles. Nuestro próximo artículo
is public comment. So at this time, we
es
welcome
los
members of the
comentarios
public who have
públicos.
signed up
Ahorita
to
les
address the
damos a la
board. There's one
bienvenida
speaker
a los
signed up
miembros
tonight.
del
The board
público.
allots
El día
45
de hoy
minutes for
tenemos a
public
una
comment. To
persona.
respect the time of all
Tiene
who are
5
present,
minutos para
speakers
el
are asked to
público
limit their remarks to
para el
3
comentario
minutes or less.
público.
A reminder to speakers to uphold our procedures for
Si
public
pueden, por
comment.
favor,
We ask you
seguir
to be
los
thoughtful and
procedimientos
constructive with your feedback and comments, and we
que
thank you
se
in
ponen en la
advance
guía. Les
for sharing.
agradecemos
Members
de
of the public who
antemano
wish to
por
share their views with the
compartir.
board
Los
may
miembros del
always do
público
so in
quieren
writing at any
compartir
time. For this
sus
evening's public comment,
opiniones,
we
pueden
received
hacerlo
0
por
written
escrito
comments.
también.
Our first speaker is Alan
El día de
Muñoz.
hoy no recibimos ningún comentario. Nuestro primer presentador es Alan Muñoz.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Alan Muñoz
Buenas
Valenciano.
tardes,
I'm the
miembros de la
regional
Junta
manager for
Directiva.
Voces
Mi
Unidas de
nombre
las
es Alan
Montañas,
Muñoz y soy
a
el gerente
nonprofit
regional
based
de
here in our
Voces
valley
Unidas,
whose
una
goal is to
organización
elevate the
sin fines de
voices of
lucro que
Latino
su
parents
meta
to
es
make
elevar las
positive
voces
and
de los
substantive
padres
changes
latinos
in our
y
school
hacer
district.
cambios
I want to start off
en
by commending the board
nuestros
and the Roaring
distritos
Fork School District for
escolares.
passing the safe
Empezar,
haven policy and
quiero
regulation.
agradecer
This significant achievement is a
las
testament to your hard
escuelas y el
work,
distrito
but also the hard work of hundreds of Latino
escolar
parents, students,
por
and
haber
community
pasado
members
esta ley de
who have been
seguridad
for over a
que
year and
va a
over a decade
estar protegiendo a
been
muchas
advocating
personas,
for
no
this
solo en las
policy to
escuelas,
be
pero
adopted.
en nuestra comunidad. Ha pasado
However,
más o
while the
menos
safe
una
haven
década
policy is a
que
victory for our
estuvimos
community,
luchando por
it
esta
doesn't mean that our
victoria.
work is over.
No quiere decir que se
The
ha terminado
education
nuestro
of
trabajo
and
con esta
future of all
victoria.
Roaring Fork School District
En el
students,
futuro, los
particularly Latino
estudiantes
students,
del
hinge
distrito
upon
escolar,
our
especialmente
continued
los
efforts.
latinos,
Complacency is not an option. I'm here today
dependen
to
de
highlight
nuestros
critical issues that
esfuerzos.
require
Estoy
our
aquí
immediate
para
attention
subrayar
if we are to
problemas
ensure a
críticos que
quality education
necesitan
for our
atención
students.
inmediata, que es
It is still
asegurar la
unacceptable that
educación
Latino
de calidad
students
para
on
todos
average
nuestros
are 2
estudiantes.
grade levels behind in core subjects.
Nuestros
It is
estudiantes latinos
unacceptable that
van
Latino
a
parents are
2
often excluded
niveles
from
más bajo que
decision-making
nuestros
spaces at
estudiantes
both the
anglo.
school district and at the
Queremos
school
que
and
las
school district
personas
level.
que estén
And
amando
it is
pasen nuevas
unacceptable that our
políticas que
teaching and
puedan
administrative
hacer
staff
un
do not
cambio.
reflect the
Es
diversity of our student body.
inaceptable que también los
Your
empleados
strategic
de
plan,
las
while a step in
escuelas
the
no
right
reflecten
direction, is
nuestra
not enough.
diversidad.
We need comprehensive,
No
detailed
es
plans addressing
suficiente.
each of these pressing issues.
Necesitamos planes
These plans
detallados
must outline specific budgetary
que estén
needs,
lidiando con estos
necessary
problemas.
human capital investments, and
Si tienen
realistic
que
yet urgent
inversionar
timeline
en
ensuring
cuestión de
that
más
these matters are
empleados
prioritized.
o
Voces
cómo
Unidas and
priorizar
our
a los
community are calling
empleados.
for the
Voces
district
Unidas y
to
nuestra
act
comunidad le
swiftly.
estamos llamando
The
al
longer we
distrito que
delay,
actúe
the more
pronto.
Latino
Entre
students will
más nos
suffer under a
tardamos, más
system that fails them.
latinos van a
We have
sufrir
to
en
seize the
este sistema
moment to
que
drive
les falla.
meaningful change and provide the quality
Tenemos que dar
education
el momento en
all of
que
our
podemos
students deserve.
proveer educación de calidad
Thank you.
para nuestros estudiantes. Gracias.
The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which
Próximo artículo
includes routine personnel,
es la
minutes from our previous
aprobación
board
de
meeting,
la
and
agenda
policy
que incluye las
IHBIB.
minutas de la reunión
Directors, are there
pasada
any items that you would like to
y las
pull off of the
políticas
consent agenda for a separate
HIB.
discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Tenemos una moción para aprobar la agenda de hoy.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Can you please call the vote?
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye.
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Titler.
Todos están
Director
de
After.
acuerdo para
Aye.
aprobar
Director
la
Ramirez.
agenda del día de hoy.
Motion
Y
passes.
las
Directors, you've
minutas
just
de
approved
la
the
agenda
consent
pasada.
agenda. The next business in order is the second reading and
Próximo
discussion of the
artículo es la
proposed
segunda
24-25
lectura
budget with Chief Markham.
de la proposición del presupuesto del próximo año con el jefe Malcolm.
Thank you. We'll jump in. Everybody will have 2 minutes, then we'll have 5 minutes of open discussion. Director Freitas, would you like to start?
No.
Okay, Director Tyler?
Do we do the presentation first or?
If you'd like to, that's fine.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we had that up. Yeah. Thank you, Director Kuhlenberg. Tonight marks the second reading of the 2024-25 budget for Roaring Fork School District. The final reading and adoption of the fiscal year 2025 budget will occur on June 26th. Presented budget has over $134 million of revenue and expenditures and an appropriation of $200 million. $97 million of revenue is budgeted for the general fund alone, which is the district's primary operating budget. Of that, over $15 million is transferred to other funds to cover necessary items such as capital maintenance and upgrades, insurance payments, early childhood programs, and support for district authorized charters. Nearly 75% of the district's revenue will come from local sources, primarily from taxes. This means the district will collect more than 90% of its fiscal year revenue between March and June 2025. While expenditures remain relatively even month to month, this creates a mismatch with revenues, which means the district will participate in the state's cash flow loan program designed to cover the gap between time periods of low cash collections and high cash collections. Many districts participate in this program. It's not a sign of financial stress, but it is another program to monitor and manage and for the board to be aware of. In the first year of the newly adopted strategic plan, the district will invest $5.5 million towards strategic priorities such as continuing the learning acceleration plan investments, newly immigrated student supports, mental health support, and retaining and recruiting talented staff. This is also a time of transition. June 30th of this year will mark the end of the current strategic plan and the beginning of the next 5-year strategic plan. This plan is the foundation upon which the budget is built and the guiding document for making any new investment. Alongside the strategic plan is a district's Unified Improvement Plan, or UIP, and is also reviewed and approved by the board, and it names specific challenges, root causes, and major improvement strategies. New investments and initiatives must support both the UIP and strategic plan. As part of the transitional period, we have a newly seated superintendent, multiple incoming building principals and assistant principals, 2 new board members, and soon a new CFO. The board and exec team have worked to strengthen communication and collaboration. That has resulted in the creation of a permanent board finance committee, which began meeting this spring. The committee will provide an avenue for better board communication and input, better collaboration on creating budgets that meet board goals and ultimately benefit the students of RFSD. I have created a proposed annual budget timeline designed to shift communication intervals and finalize investments earlier than the current process and to provide time at each step along the way for thoughtful work to occur. With that, I'll begin tonight's presentation. This presentation remains largely unchanged from before. I know there was desire to discuss this publicly, so oops. Okay, so tonight's, oops. So tonight we'll cover budget assumptions, hit some high-level assumptions on and discuss the general fund, discuss the early childhood fund, food service fund, and our designated purpose grant fund, and then open the floor for questions and discussion. So moving on to slide 3. This year we're budgeting for 5,717 students, of which 5,187 will attend district-operated schools. The remaining 530 will attend district-authorized charters. The state legislated per pupil funding is $12,172, and the total program funding tied to that is $69.6 million. Our net assessed value, as everyone knows, increased significantly this past fiscal year. Will remain close to $1.8 billion. The estimated total mill levy for the upcoming fiscal year 24-25 will be 43.449 and will generate local property taxes in excess of $79 million. Overall, this budget supports employing 823 full-time people. This does not exclude extracurricular coaches or athletic coaches, which also add people in positions to the mix as well. Raises for all staff are budgeted at 6.25%. For the exec team, that is at 5.25%, which is meeting inflation. The Medicare percentage is 1.45%, and the para percentage is 21.4%. Health insurance is remaining at $10,500. We'll be entering the second year of being self-funded, and that amount has not changed. So we're not increasing health insurance contributions, nor increasing the contributions from employees. So I think that's a big win here in year 1, moving to year 2 for that program. So moving on to general fund revenue, we've covered a lot of this in detail, so this will be pretty high level. moving from here. Total program funding, again, funded pupil count of 5,717 pupils. Multiplied by the per pupil funding of 12,172 gets total program funding of $69.5 million. This is by far the largest share of revenue that we get. It's funded from three separate sources, local property taxes, local specific ownership tax, and the state backfills the rest. So as we collect more locally, as we've seen here over the last 2 years, that funding shifts from the state to local taxpayers. Other local funding includes the mill levy overrides, which are estimated $18.0 million for next year, which is $3,148 per pupil. There's additional specific ownership taxes, interest on delinquent taxes, as well as interest on invested cash. Interest on invested cash is expected to be somewhere around $1.5 million next year. As we collect more cash locally, we have higher cash balances for longer, and given the interest rate environment, that increases revenue as well. Moving on to state funding. The state provides, in addition to equalization through total program funding, various grants in support of early literacy through the READ Act, transportation support, special education, and English language proficiency. In total, we estimate those to be $3.4 million, or just over $600 per pupil. Federal funding. In addition to the general fund, we also receive funding that comes into our designated purpose fund. But for these purposes in the general fund, we receive about $1.8 million. It's less than 2% of our general fund revenue. And it's primarily in the form of special education support through IDEA. The $1.1 million listed here, or 1.2, is actually slightly higher after we got the final estimate from the state. Medicaid reimbursements that come in, those have been increasing over the past couple of years, and the local service plan says that we use that to support our family liaison program in the schools. Okay. General fund expenditures. In the past, these have been presented kind of all rolled up, and it can be fairly overwhelming with multiple years, budget iterations, differences, percentages. So trying to break it down, we'll start high level. This slide shows what we call program areas, so that instruction, pupil services, instructional support are various programs that are operated out of the general fund. This shows expenditures next year of just under $84 million, which is an increase of nearly $2 million over the current year. As is typical, salaries and benefits are over 84% of our budgeted expenditures. So the largest expenditure for the district is its people. So the people are our most valuable resource, and that's what we're spending our money on. One change for this year is moving the early childhood expenditures and revenues from the general fund to its own fund to better track the revenues and expenditures for that program in a specific fund. The 670 people supported in the general fund are broken down as such. You can see the lion's share are certified teachers with over 438 expected FTE, and as well as support personnel. Total compensation, so salary plus benefits, will exceed $70 million for next year. So we're fortunate this year to have additional revenue, and that means additional investments. And these investments, as mentioned in my opening comments, are designed to align with strategic priorities. Both last year, the board approved moving forward with responding to UIP through the LAP, which is a learning acceleration program. So this year, we're adding 6.5 FTE on a permanent basis, estimated to cost $670,000. I know we talk a lot about the people we're adding, but as Chief Park has pointed out, it is a lot more than people when we talk about accelerating our students' learning. The chart shows the investments over the full 2 years of the LAP. Additional investments in critical areas of focus. We're adding 2 FTE to support schools with newly immigrated students. These will be student-facing positions. They're budgeted at $211,000. Chief Park, Superintendent Cole, and myself went through a fairly rigorous process, gathering data, working with schools to see where those 2 FTE should be deployed. We heard pretty resoundingly from schools that having 0.11 of a person isn't really helpful. And so we tried to be as thoughtful as possible while providing the maximum support for the schools that needed it most. We're also providing additional support, $200,000 for student-based mental health. And then the next slide shows the total strategic investments. You can see the largest one by far is retaining and recruiting staff. That 6.25% raise is estimated to be $3.9 million, along with the other investments listed there. A lot of those are tied to the first year of the strategic plan, as we mentioned, the equity audit, the data dashboard support, communications audit. All those are things that need to be done on the first year of the strategic plan in order to move forward with the rest of the work. Moving on and looking at instruction. When we hear instruction, we think about what happens in schools. This is generally what we're thinking. This is direct instruction to students. You can see the vast majority of our expenditures are here. Again, that's where most of our certified teachers are going to show up, and that's most of that expenditure. General fund expenses will be $9,934 per pupil for the instructional program next year. Student support services. These are activities designed to assess and improve the well-being of students. These are things like health aides and counselors and nurses. So very near to the work that happens in the instructional program, but separate. Just over $1,060 per pupil will be spent on this. Again, mostly certified teachers and support staff in this area. Instructional support services. So these are services that you think about instructional coaches, the work that comes out of Chief Parks Department in supporting our instructors and getting better at their jobs every day. This is $744 per pupil and is an increase. This is where we spend more on instructional coaches through the LAP. You'll see an increase in expenditures here. General administration, these are the activities concerned with basically administering the district. So Office of the Superintendent, the board's budget itself, the central office management, again, about $204 per pupil. Has 2 employees currently, superintendent being one and the district office manager being the second. Moving on quickly to school administration. This is exactly what it sounds like. These are the front offices from the principals and assistant principals, the front office specialists that manage school finance, attendance, and registrars. Just shy of $1,200 per pupil. Business administration, this is the finance department, essentially comes in at $156 per pupil. This department has 6 people, CFO, payroll manager, and a financial controller, as well as 3 support staff supporting payroll, accounts payable, and general finance. Maintenance and facilities, really any maintenance of the entire school district. So from grounds to capital maintenance to buildings. This department employs 54 people, as well as this is because 54 feels low. I'll have to audit that. $9 million of expenditure. Custodial, we've seen a huge change there. We've seen moving money from salaries and benefits to professional services, basically contracting out custodial services because of our inability to hire. So while the dollars remain the same, the categories have shifted from prior years. Student transportation is exactly what it sounds like. These are the activities that get kids to and from school. Really, I think one of the most powerful things I heard Chief Bonefox say is that this is kind of where equity begins. It makes sure our kids that need to get to school can get to school. That's where their day begins and ends. Just over $650 per pupil. This is your bus drivers, the director of transportation, mechanics are all rolled up here. And then other central support for us, it's IT, HR, and communications are the big departments that roll up here. Again, supporting 16 folks at $500 per pupil. And then to provide a picture of reserves, this is added from the last time, but it's important. As was pointed out before, we're budgeting to spend more than we have in net revenue. And that is typical. Typically we have departments that carry over money from year to year. And so as that money is carried over, it's coming from reserves. You can see at the bottom that after a 3% table reserve and the 10% reserve per the board's policy, unencumbered reserves are estimated to be $2.7 million. That's money that could be saved for a rainy day. It could be deployed for other strategic purposes, but it is there as a resource if needed. Okay, so moving on from the general fund, we move into a more specific fund, which is for early childhood. This is new this year. Given the increase in this program, the growing complexity, the stacked funding, the different revenue streams, we thought it was important to be able to match revenues with expenditures and to also be able to view the general fund support for this program. And next year, we're estimating support at just shy of $1.3 million from the general fund. This program supports 79 people across our 5 preschool programs. I think for the first year, we'll have infant care. The expanding and absorption of the basalt program has increased the cost, but also the capacity of the early childhood program. So we're estimating 320 children served, 110 3-year-olds, 145 4-year-olds, 15 infants, and 50 toddlers. 98 of those will participate in our extended day programs. The staff sliding scale provides tuition relief to staff of over $125,000. So again, that's just another way that the district supports staff with children here. Next, we'll take a look at the food service fund. This fund provides the activities concerned with providing food to students and staff at the school district. So we're estimating about 28 people employed here. We're going to serve over 3,800 meals a day, which I think comes to like 630,000 meals for the year, which is pretty incredible. The average daily cost is $17,700. Average daily revenue is slightly less than that. So we're going to dip into what is currently a very healthy fund balance in that fund. And last, I think we're going to look at the designated purpose grant funds. This is where we track specific grants that we get from both the state and local and federal government. So everything from the EARS grant, which supports our multi-tiered systems of support. It took me 5 years to get that one. I couldn't tell you what EARS stands for, unfortunately.
Building at risk.
There you go. I knew you were up here. But these programs, while we always try and keep grants not at arm's length, that's not the right word, but they do become critical to the way we operate and provide student support here at the district. Any loss of grant funding is a loss of service, and we try and do our best to maintain grants as much as possible. Over close to 45 people are paid for through this fund, including FRC and pre-collegiate, as well as interventionists at the elementary schools through our Title I funding. We're estimated to have at least 40 unique grants with revenues and/or expenditures that come through each year. It's about $6 million. Each of these grants has an application, a budget, interim financial reports, annual financial reports, updated budgets. A lot goes in behind the scenes, and oftentimes it doesn't matter the amount of the grant, all that stuff must be done. So it is quite the lift from both what I would call the program manager, so the people who are actually deploying those resources in schools, to the back office, which is finance supporting the reporting and tracking of expenditures. With that, I'll turn it back over to the board for their question and discussion session.
Thank you. Dr. Tyler.
Thank you for your presentation. My first question is that spreadsheet that we got about budget and board questions, were answers going to be provided in there?
The last I checked, there was 2 questions in there, and I had answered both.
Okay, I put some in Monday morning.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So I don't know if do you want me to leave those questions and?
You can go ahead and ask them now, and we'll see if I can answer them on the spot.
Okay, can I ask for more than the 2 minutes then, or how do we want to go about that?
There are 7 of them, 8, 7.
Pick your most important
Yeah,
ones.
pick a couple of your top ones.
And then the other ones will just get
Yeah.
answered.
Yeah, sorry, there hadn't been much activity there for about 3 or 4 weeks, so I hadn't.
I guess, I would say on line number, I don't know if you have that open or not. On line number 12, it says in slide number 19, and I don't know if that was the same 19. I should have looked at what that was. What are other services for? This was for general fund expenditures, and it says other services for $1.6 million. Can you define it all what those other services are?
Sorry, my slide 19 has other expenditures of 31,000.
Okay, it was for the slide for general fund expenditures from the last, the one that we were presented with along with that.
The topic.
General fund expenditures instruction.
So it's slide 16, I think. Is the instruction slide.
Other services, that is almost 100% our payment to BOCES.
So that's BOCES there.
Like in other purchase services, how that shows up.
And then there was other expenditures for 543,000 also, is that on that one?
Yeah, and so that is primarily funds that are carried over from year to year and kind of held in contingency. And so the way those are rolled out and budgeted are as other expenditures until they're defined. So what you would see is an underspend on that category and overspend somewhere else as those are deployed. But canon will say you can't spend contingency, you should spend it how you are spending it.
Okay. In the charter school allocations, they're for $8.25 million. I understand that for the 530 students, that comes out to 6.4 million. Is that extra money of the almost $1.8 million? Is that Ross money at this point? And is that
No,
where?
in addition to the state per pupil funding, they participate in basically every other state grant. So REDACT, Title I, Title II, Title III, IDEA, ECEA, state transportation, gifted and talented. All that stuff gets passed through to them on a per pupil basis.
So that doesn't include Ross money then?
No,
And where is that money being held?
that's held on our end.
But where is that in this budget?
I mean, we're spending it in all these line items. It's not like a Ross line item.
So it's just expenditures going into our general budget.
That we try
So we
to
don't
treat
have, like, I know in the past that's sort of been earmarked for specific
as-
ideas that we wanted to do. I thought that money, like, it was being used for specific categories.
And so this year, a lot of like the one-time strategic expenditures around sped audit, equity audit, that's what we're spending that on because we're trying to treat it as one-time. money.
But is in the budget for the future, we don't have it budgeted for any particular area.
No,
In the insurance reserve fund,
yes.
that's gone up like 100,000, 250, $550,000 over the last 3 years. What's the thought on why that's happened?
Our premiums are increasing. So that's the property pool that we're a part of, the Colorado School District Self-Insurance Pool or SIDSIP. That pool we're a part of has experienced extensive losses from hail damage and other things. So as that happens, our costs go up, as well as our workers' comp has really seen an increase over the last 3 or 4 years.
So the fact that we're budgeting the same amount for our insurance for next year, that doesn't have any. I guess I was confused with the part where we were saying that we were having the same amount of expenditures, that at least employees are paying the same amount next year. Are we expecting to pick up extra amount on that, or?
So that does not include the insurance reserve fund is separate from our self-insurance health insurance pool.
And so can you explain, so for what is that then? I'm a little
That's our
confused.
property and liability, our auto insurance, our workers' comp, our unemployment insurance. Property casualty. Is that like the 1.3, I think is what that is. 1.55.
And then on what you presented to us today, you mentioned that on page 16 of your presentation from today, why is it that there are, I'm not on the right page, let me get there real fast. It's showing that in general fund expenditures, why are salaries less from the budget from last year? Is that because of early childhood being taken out? Is that where that difference is?
Exactly. So we moved 78 employees, all of whom would be on that category that have moved to their own fund. As well as, per the DAC really wanted to make sure that coaching was called out. So there were several coaches who are classified as certified. So per the DAC's recommendation, we moved that to the instructional support category, as well as some library assistants, which can kind of go both ways, but we correctly categorize those as well under instructional support.
And I guess just one last question. Thank you for your patience. On the early childhood fund page, where it says our total expenditures are $5 million, basically,
Yes.
and tuition is $1,200. I'm curious of where is it that we are running such a deficit between tuition and total expenditures when you just look at a regular program that is running? Most programs, their total expenditures are being covered by tuition and they're paying rent. So I'm just not quite understanding why is our tuition only a quarter of our expenditures, where I understand where our prices are a little bit lower than free market, but
So you have
compared-
to also lump that state amount in there. That $2.6 million is the UPK. That's the universal pre-K payments we get from the state. So that is also tuition. It just is coming from the state. But you're right, the transfer from the general fund, that subsidy from the general fund is large. And part of that is due to we serve kids that quite frankly aren't served as well at private daycare, right? We're taking kids on IEPs and providing specialized services. And then health insurance is a big cost for us as well.
So that state money is considered quote unquote tuition.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Director After?
Great, thanks. First of all, thanks for the answer to my question in the board tracker. I think that was a couple weeks ago now, but I just saw it admittedly and it was really helpful. And it for the other board members, I asked about the implication of the School Finance Act. And I did not realize that it doesn't take effect until starting next fiscal year, 25-26, right? So good to know. Thanks also for the helpful memo that came along with this presentation today.
You're welcome.
That was great to see. Thanks. I just wanted to focus my questions on the slide 25, the reserves. Can you talk a little bit about all the carryover that's coming from curricular materials, professional development, school budget allocations, and the Education Opportunity Fund? Is that saying that that funding wasn't used in this current fiscal year and it's being carried forward into next fiscal year
Exactly.
in all those categories?
Yeah, so curriculum materials is Chief Parks Department. Curriculum can be very lumpy in how you spend it. It's not an even 500,000 a year. You might have to deploy $1 million one year to implement new curriculum, heavy PD with a new curriculum coming in, and then it can kind of taper off. So you'll see that ebb and flow over the years. School budget allocations, we allow schools to carry over the discretionary funds from one year to the other so that they're able to redeploy funds they don't use this year for those schools next year. That has actually come down. That was over $1 million a couple years ago. And again, from board prompting, I think specifically Director Ramirez saying they need to be spending that money. They have spent over $500,000 and plan to spend more for the upcoming year. We set a target, some sort of carryover around, we'll say 25%. So most schools that, would be a $20,000 carryover. It just allows them, if great PD comes up or they need something, there's some opportunity that they can take advantage of. They have that money saved without having to rely on the district. Education Opportunity Fund, those seed funds was originally $300,000, came from the 2021 mill levy override. That was the part of the Ross funds that year, as Director Tyler pointed out. And that's basically assistance in helping RFSD staff get educated.
So, yeah, I remember getting a presentation on the Education Opportunity Fund a few months ago. Are you feeling like it's undersubscribed, given that out of 300K, there's 240 being carried over?
It's taken a little while to get off the ground. I think we're wrapping up this was the first semester of payments, which was about $55,000. So from here on out, we should see more spending there.
Is that a total amount that we have, or is it supposed to be 300K a year, or is it 300?
Right now, we're waiting to see what the run rate is before there's some sort of ongoing investment. So that will dwindle until some future decision is made on how to fund that permanent.
And then what does scheduled use of reserves refer to? That's just the total?
That's the sum of those
Oh, okay,
four
got it.
items.
And then does the district think about it ahead of time or plan for what to do with the unencumbered reserves, or you mentioned a rainy day fund, is that the plan for it?
I mean, technically, all reserves are a rainy day fund.
Right.
You know, the 3% Tabor, those are kind of like the things you touch last resort. I believe the way those work, once you spend your Tabor reserves, like the first dollars you appropriate in your next budget have to repay those, if I remember correctly. 10% policy reserve, you can go below that. I think the board simply has to acknowledge that they understand they're going below that. And then unencumbered reserves are really what they sound like. You could buy more housing, you could hire more temporary workers, you could do things that the board wants to do. Anything that's on the strategic plan is, you know, there to be funded.
So how does the district touch those? Do you come to the board and ask for permission to use the unencumbered reserves?
I think as we're building a budget, if we see a critical need that we need to get something done, we would say, you know, these are areas that for investment that current revenue won't cover. Is this something that the board feels comfortable spending reserves on? I know Director Tyler's passionate about housing and finding housing, and we have talked at length around, you know, is that something you could use to support housing efforts? So those are all things that, you know, the board is more, you know, I think those are great discussions for the finance committee to talk about.
Okay, just one final question on that school budget allocation carryover. So it sounds like you'd be happy with carrying over like half of the 500K that is sitting
Yeah.
there. I heard a teacher recently, I've heard this, I think everyone's heard this before, but I did just hear this maybe a month ago, use their own money to buy school supplies. And I feel like if we're sitting on some cash, then that either that message isn't getting across, but yeah, there's a disconnect there that is real unfortunate, either in the optics of it or the reality of it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that is heartbreaking to hear, because schools, you know, almost without exception have money so that teachers don't have to do that. And we beat the drum from January on this year. Like, if you have money, people, you know, we don't want to hear those stories because they shouldn't be happening. Especially when you consider that the district invested $300,000 this year in paying school fees, supply fees for children who are FRA eligible. So that's another $300,000 that schools got. Like, I don't think there is any scenario in which a teacher in our district should be buying their own supplies.
Yeah. Thanks.
Director Ramirez?
I just want to reiterate the gratitude for the memo. Great job, you guys. I really appreciate just how thorough we are. And also just like thanks to the team for the incredible push that we've done in finance to make sure that it's clear and precise. And just like even going through this PowerPoint presentation, was really happy just being able to think like any family can come in here, any teacher can come in here and understand. And I really appreciate that commitment.
Thank you.
I wanted to just follow up on some questions in regards to the audits and what we've budgeted towards them. I believe we have 3. There's the equity audit. Crashing and burning now. There's the communications audit and there's the SPED program. I'm just wondering how those budget allocations were decided. And if we think we've budgeted enough in all of these sections. Is that because we've already seen proposals?
Yeah, so particularly around the equity audit, we had originally budgeted closer to 100,000, and when actual bids began to come back around 45, we said, hey, now we can go ahead and fund the data work. That's kind of been put on hold and is also critical to our strategic plan that's upcoming.
Awesome. And then, so thank you for that. And then I also just wanted to ask, and this is more of a clarifying question. So ECE has been pulled out. Now we have ECE as a standalone. Other programs, and like I again appreciate how thorough we were in this PowerPoint presentation and with the memo. But for the designated purpose grant fund, are we saying that the Family Resource Center, the pre-collegiate program, and like mental health professionals, everything that was within this fund, is that only funded through this fund, or are we pulling from somewhere else?
I mean, almost the entire FRC is going to show up in here in one form or another. They get a lot of local funding as well as transfer from the general fund. The general fund does support pre-collegiate and the FRC, but each of these has its own, like their budgets within this budget, right? So there's an EARS budget that says, here's the number of people, here's how we're spending it, so on and so forth.
Okay. And where is that in our general fund?
What do you mean?
Like where does that lie?
Like
Within
that
the
support for
general
these
fund.
programs?
Yeah.
So in the transfers to other funds, there's a line item for 1.165 million. So it goes out, it shows as an outgoing from the general fund, and it shows as an incoming into that fund.
But it's not here. I mean, it's not listed here right now, or it is.
Yeah, so if you go to slide
Sorry.
29,
29. Got it.
it's the last in the long box on the left. It's the second to last line that says transfer
Oh,
from general.
I see it. Okay.
So there's a corresponding, that's an inflow. There's a corresponding outflow in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
You got the sun.
I know.
Right,
I want to
guys.
go home now.
Director Frady.
Just to echo what Director Ramirez said, thank you. I think that presentation you just gave, having already heard a bunch of these things, it was still just really well crafted. And I'm wondering if there is a plan to make that available, this specific one we got tonight, more publicly. Is it on the website? How could we share that?
I was working with Christina Vargas, who then went on maternity leave. So we can certainly put it out there. I know it's not super easy to navigate through Diligent, but we can certainly look at putting that.
It just might be some value, just again, what Director Ramirez said, it's very accessible and it's well organized. And I don't think that that effort should go to waste when our priorities sometimes is transparency around these budgets. So seeing that effort. And then just kind of at the very high level, Director After sort of touched on this, but I had a couple of questions I just wanted to say out loud. Where does Colorado rank in per pupil funding for the nation? Last I heard, we were 40th.
It depends on kind of which study you look at. We are definitely in the bottom half. One study ranked us 51. There's only 50 states, so it's kind of, but that was, I think, for wage. I mean, that kind of takes in wages we can pay, which is a funding thing, and cost of living. Yeah, I don't have a specific number. It's still not really.
Yeah, it's really low. And it's not something that our district has any control over when it comes to setting that per pupil amount.
Right. So what we can control locally is our mill levy overrides, which we have maxed out.
Right.
We've done what we can locally. And now we're kind of, it's up to the state. So they have implemented the new funding formula, which Director After asked about. That will put more money in to our district for sure. One of the things they did change, which kind of offset some of that positive for us, is they moved the cost of living factor and capped it. I think they capped it at 23% if you're Aspen, and it's basically 2 times the amount, the cost of living. Like they're going to lose money. Aspen will lose $6 million. So it offsets some of our gains. We're net winners, but
yeah, and removing the negative factor just allows us to start growing, but we still have 12 years, like a whole generation of students who've never been in a fully funded classroom.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so it's taken as a state, $10 billion, which is essentially what we spend in 1 year. So we basically have forgone 1 year of education funding since that was implemented.
Yeah, I think I heard some conversations with local leaders that this is still not quite landing, that even though our property taxes have gone up and all these great bills have been passed, that money is not going to be in front of us or let alone in our classrooms. Even with the new school finance budget from McCluskey, it's like 2030 before that's fully implemented.
Yep.
And I think I'm just saying it for the record. I know I'm preaching to the choir
Yeah.
here, so thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, I think that's the next big step, is to figure out a way to have boards cooperate and advocate at the state level for state level changes. Because as we say, budgets reflect priorities. When we're 40th in the country in funding education, I think that shows where the state's priorities are.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to echo the same thing that you just heard. This was so well laid out. I think breaking it down to per pupil dollars really makes it concrete for people to understand that this is the rough percentage of money that's going towards each of these services and can allow you to put them next to each other and gauge their benefits. I just have one general question. Since I've been on the board, our raises have outpaced inflation pretty significantly. So we're providing more for our employees than inflation. And we're doing that again this year. I just looked it up. I think so 2023, it was 4% on average nationwide. I'm sure it was higher here. But do you think that that's sustainable long term? It seems like that is a trend that we've been on for at least a few years now, which creates expectations. And is that something that we can maintain and sustain?
I think that's a strategic discussion to have long-term, right? I mean, one of the strategic items or pillars is attract and retain, and you do that generally through compensation. And it's keeping up with your neighbors, which aren't always the best because it's 178 different school districts, all their funding looks different. So it's kind of, you're still competing, but it's not always the most useful metric. There's just so many things that go into that. The state has been putting more money in beyond inflation. If it's ever inflation is the only per pupil increase we get, like, it makes it really hard because cost of utilities go up, cost of gas goes, all that stuff goes up, and that whittles away what you have. So long term, probably not, but don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah. Thank you. So we'll move to 5 minutes of open discussion. If anyone has anything else on this? Sorry.
I don't want to read on this, but I'm wondering, Chief Markham, on page 29, where it says the total state, total federal, and then transfer from general, is that supposed to equal to 5 million? Is that what we're adding?
Yeah, so you also need to make sure you include the local funds above of 1.57 million.
Got it. Okay.
Just two more follow-ups. So there was a couple questions I didn't get to on that
Mhm.
form. So if you just have a chance to throw something in there.
Yep.
When you get a chance, that would be great. And I too would like to say I really appreciated the layout of it. One thing that of the presentation and how the budget's been laid out to make it easy to understand. I was wondering if it'd be possible when there was like other services, if there can be some more detail about that. It's like when it says other services, $1.5 million, that seems like a pretty big other.
Yeah.
And so if there could be a little bit more detail with what that other is, that would be helpful.
Yeah, certainly. Would you like that in the presentation? I feel like typically that's something that would be in the write-up where you kind of go through much more granular, not necessarily line by line, but here's the big things you see in there. Or would you like it in a presentation, more of a summary format?
I guess just like in this presentation that we just had, when it says others, there might be a parentheses that says BOCES / whatever else that other is.
I mean, I want to tell you that like this feedback's really helpful because what you've seen Chief Markham do is, I think some of the first iterations of these slide decks, you didn't have that narrative that has been so helpful. So this is good for us to think, oh gosh, we missed that. Try to capture those pieces and say, oh, this means these positions, but the others are not areas, so we can continue to flush that.
Yeah. I think something that, and it's built into the new timeline that I mentioned earlier, but I think my first year here, well, I'll say second, because the first year was the first year of COVID and that was its own thing. But really trying to start with in January, here's what revenues are looking like, showing an update of revenues at the next meeting with kind of and gradually building on. And I think that's where at one of those work sessions, like really diving into like, here's when we say other, providing that detail, and then it's there. And again, you're kind of building up a story over the course of multiple months. That first year, it's here's your 2 readings and it's a 60-page document. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I have no choice but to say yes to this. Otherwise we don't have school and I'm not like, so I think your point is well taken and, definitely something we can add to the taking time to go into that detail and then leaving that call out as the budget progresses.
And I think just from a finance committee perspective, we have had conversations now where we want to get more into a cadence of going through the budget at earlier time so that we can be having some of these conversations and bringing it back to the board with more time ahead of approving the budget. And I think that's a commitment that we all share of moving forward, making sure that we bring in the DAC, that we are, giving ourselves enough time to review and to bring forth what we think is really necessary for you guys to see during the presentation. So that way we can help answer questions, and we're not all trying to figure out how to ask questions at the end. I did have one question about the Dean of Culture for some reason. And maybe I'm wrong, and I apologize if I'm wrong, but did we not have a Dean of Culture in all of our schools now? Wasn't that part of this?
They're in all the middle and high schools, but not in the elementary.
Elementary.
Unless the elementary is much of it. Not bad, but.
Yeah, I don't think anybody.
Well, doesn't GSES have one?
Yeah, GSES has budgeted that on. This year they do. I think next year they've changed that to a prevention specialist position.
Okay.
Double check, but from district planning, it's middle and high schools.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Thank you all.
No.
We're good.
That's it. Yeah, no vote. Second reading. We'll vote at our next meeting. Thank you. The next business in order is action on the proposed 24-25 student fees. Do I have a motion to approve the proposed 24-25 student fees?
I move that we approve the proposed 24-25 student fees.
Is there a second?
I second.
We'll now have 2 minutes discussion for each board member and 5 minutes of open discussion. Director DeFreitas, do you have any questions or comments on student fees?
Just comments that I appreciate as a mother of 3 students in elementary school, that I get a flat rate of what I can send to the school that's going to help them, and that the teachers are able to address equity issues by distributing supplies in the classroom that allow all the students sitting in the same room to succeed equally. I know that there's parents who have a vision of how school prep used to go for them and what they would buy and what they would bring, but I appreciate our district's move to have standard fees that supply all those students with what they need.
Director Tyler?
I maybe just have 2 questions. I think the first one was, how are we as a district communicating this to parents? Because I know there was a lot of confusion, like, why do I have this fee as a parent and how much is that fee? And there was, I know at least at the high school last year, a lot of questions about fees, and has there been some kind of communication that's been clearing that up?
Working on that all year. Yeah, it wasn't a clean rollout of this process, which you remember actually started this past year across the board. Some of our schools did a much better job with communication, and we've learned what works better and what doesn't. And so I think it was quite a significant change for some of our schools and programs. And so we've really tried to be a lot more deliberate this year about checking in with finance specialists, making sure they understand, making sure the communications are ready when we come back in August. So it's been tricky. And I think one of the things that makes it really hard and is going to continue to make it really hard is the way the federal school lunch program works and the eligibility requirements from like the direct certification process that happened. The fact that we still need kind of reintroduced lunch eligible numbers, it's still quite confusing for folks. So it's very tricky and we were having meetings this week and planning more meetings coming up to kind of continually strengthen communications on this. Because it's quite complex in the way we are able to waive fees and that families really have to authorize us to do that. And that is tricky. And it's confusing.
Oh, I'm glad that that is being better communicated.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think it's gonna take a while, but we'll get there.
And then as far as I'm maybe still questioning or not understanding a little bit because the idea that I'm seeing on this fee parameters is talking about like we can only be using it for these certain things and it can't be used for copy paper and all of that it says. But what I'm hearing like them from at least the middle school is that there are no student supply lists. We're just going to pay for it out of our general fund. And is that something that is a school decision then on how they're doing that, or is that across the board?
So it's a little tricky. Our expectation with the fees is that parents would not be asked to bring notebooks, consumables, pencils. They wouldn't be expected to go buy things. That the school is then purchasing any sort of materials, markers, crayons for students, especially at the elementary, middle school level. Where historically, and it's so different. And I think this was part of the inequity was that we had schools that would post supply lists. And we have schools that would charge fees and it was incredibly inconsistent. And so the challenge is very unique in making the shift to this level of consistency is different for every single school based on what they've done historically and what their families expect. And so there is definitely some like change management work that we're doing with different schools. Everybody needs something a little different to get on board with this in the way that they think about supplies and materials. But to Director DeFreitas' point, it is really about equity. It's about consistency and not putting the onus of these materials on individual parents to go shopping.
And that's what I was understanding it. I guess I'm just questioning where your cursor is right now on that line where it says fees is at the top of page 2 of the.
Gotcha. There is some of these rulings like this do align to the board policy on fees, which states things like fees will not, like some of this use of fees came directly from the board policy. And I apologize, I'm not sure which one that is right now, but we can certainly look it up. But there is alignment. And to be honest, where it says supply list may include these items as optional. When we wrote this, we were still trying to make it somewhat of an option for schools if they wanted to stick with supply lists.
Right. So I guess that's where my confusion is. So like, are we saying there's supply list or there's not supply list? And if there's not supply list, should that even be there, that paragraph?
It's a good catch. There should, I mean, we're at the point now where we were kind of doing a nudge last year. We're expecting this much more consistently across the board this year. And so we probably should, I don't think we scrubbed for that language that, our expectation is that there are not supply lists moving into 24.
Okay, so that's just something that needs to be updated.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're voting on this tonight.
Yeah,
So are
we
you
should-
proposing that we strike?
So I do suppose
yeah,
that we
that's-
would strike probably that first bullet point.
The whole first bullet point, or would you like to strike the clause and supply lists will not include? Should it just say?
Well, I just think
fees will
that
not
first
be
part that
used
says
for-
fees will not be used for and supply lists will not include. And if we're saying that there's not going to be supply lists, I don't think that that part should be there also.
We have to be really clear about this since we're voting on it. So I propose that we strike from the header, use of fees, these 3 words and supply lists. So it would read fees are to benefit the instructional program. Fees will not be used for non-instructional supplies such as Kleenex, Clorox wipes, etc. And we should be striking this comma and supply list will not include, and this additional comma, and then the following two sentences. That makes sense. Can someone with editing access strike those so that the board can see it? Did I do that? We
It didn't
can't
show
see
up.
it. We can't see-
I think we need to be given edit access.
Or if you just want to, oh, it's up here, so we can see it up here. It's the very top of page 2, right? Use of fees. Okay, so strike and supply lists from that header.
Up a line.
Yeah, up one more
Oh,
line
oops.
after, right after use of fees. And then in the next one, I would unstrike. You gotta strike the first comma. Fees will not be used for, strike that comma. Strike and supply list will not include, strike the second comma. And then unstrike non-instructional items such as Kleenex, Clorox wipes, etc. So it should just read, fees will not be used for non-instructional items
Well,
or non-instructional supplies. Because that aligns with policy, right? Yeah, both the last sentences, the last two sentences should both be struck. We can do a quick search for supply lists anywhere else in this document,
Good idea.
under elementary. Under elementary and middle schools, the value of items included on the supply list. Same under high schools. Also under notification of fees. Which is up at the top. And then under fee parameters, there's one more mention. It says parameters and supply lists will be approved annually by the Board of Education. It's all the way at the very top. Get them all.
thanks. That's it.
Director After, do you have anything else? Sorry,
Yeah,
do
do
you
you
have
find that
anything?
the athletic fee is a limiting factor to students participating? It's higher than I thought it would be.
Say that again. Sorry, can you ask the question? again?
Sorry, athletic fees seem high to me. Do you think those fees limit participation, even though I see that FRL folks are getting 50% waived?
You know, I don't know that it's been a barrier to participation. I think athletics are tricky. As a district, we have a very minimal investment in athletic programming. Our athletic directors feel strongly that students participating do have an investment, a financial investment for the team and the equipment and the materials and the refs and the buses. And it's been pretty stable at this amount for as long as I think I can, at least the last couple of years. And I would certainly say that I know our athletic directors work really closely with kids and families who find this a barrier. And have really tried to find creative ways to minimize the cost of that. But I do think that there is a gigantic Pandora's box about athletics and our investment in them. That we could open at some point.
Okay, as with many things, I am confused about how the fees here relate to charter schools, which have totally different fee structure, at least CCS, I was just on their website, $595 fees for this year, per student. To what extent do we have any say or leverage or anything with when it comes to CC or to the charter schools fees. I think Two Rivers actually is not charging fees, but they do have supply lists on their website.
Under our current contract, we have little influence. When that contract comes up for renegotiation, I think it's something we could certainly put on the table, that we would like that to be an area where our charter is aligned to our board policy and practices, or, I think that's something that we could negotiate through that next process. But right now we don't, it's not an area where we have an influence or control.
Thanks.
Director Ramirez?
Thanks. In the high school section, and I'm not sure if we updated that, but it says supply material fees, activity fees, the value of items included on the classroom supply list.
We struck that.
Um, okay. So I just supply and material fees, that's what we're saying 180 per student. And I just want to make sure I'm assuming that if the student is free reduced lunch, that there is support from.
It's all waived. If the parent, actually, let me categorize that. If a student and family is FRL eligible and they would like those benefits to extend to school fees, then they're entirely waived.
Okay.
And we as a district pay the school for that 180.
Got it. So I guess my ask then of you and the team, and I'm glad that we're looking at this policy prior to next school year, is along the lines of what Director Tyler was saying, of making sure that we're sharing this with families as soon as possible and with staff. Because like we all know, depending on the school that we're going to, there are supply lists, there are expectations of just writing a check, there are expectations of Kleenex boxes. And I mean, I understand that, that is how we've had this process. But I think many of us are used to that process and assume that that is what is going to be the process for next year. And so the sooner that we're able to send this out to families, whether it's a press release, whether it's a push, at the first week of August, I just think it's super important because some families, they start saving money for some of these supplies now. And so, I think this is amazing work. I really appreciate the dedication from our team to make sure that our students and families are supported, and that we're taking this, what some would consider a burden for them, off of their plate. And I do appreciate that commitment. I just want to make sure that we're communicating as much as possible on the front end so that we don't end up in a situation where families weren't aware and for whatever reason, schools shared supply list or whatever, and then, we have duplication of items that we didn't need. Thank you.
I don't have any questions or concerns about this. One last edit. We need to delete the and in the third bullet under high school and elementary and middle. Delete that and comma and add a period to be consistent. I appreciate having the communication language highlighted for the schools, and I hope that they utilize that. It goes out. And yeah, we can't see.
We still can't
If you
see that.
scroll up to we can't see it on our end. So if you scroll up, it's also under elementary and middle. Oh, you got it. Okay, great. 5 minutes of open discussion. If anyone has anything.
Just piggybacking on what Director Ramirez said about come August or whatever for supply lists, I think it's also important that we send something out now, because families are going to be shopping for supply lists, and even often before they get their official list or whatever, they're going to go out and buy
No more official lists, right?
Right. So,
Okay.
but before a list would come.
Yeah.
to them,
Or maybe
that-
just a communication that there will be no list. We're not delinquent in
Yeah.
getting the list out, but there will
Right,
be
it's
no
not
list
coming.
this year.
It's not.
No list is coming your way.
Yeah.
State Elementary got that out to all of us before the end.
Yeah.
And then,
That's the only reason I was like, oh yeah, I know about this.
and then one more question on the notes at the bottom of this parameters list. I have some questions about that as far as it seemed like in the second half of it said, we will in 23, 24 explore. Did we explore and what did we come up with? And so that language seems a little bit questionable.
Yeah, we did not. We did not have the capacity to follow up on this and sort through the AP costs or outdoor education costs above and beyond. It became a kind of a capacity issue in terms of being able to do that. So we can absolutely update or delete the notes because we haven't done that work. I think there are some really deep questions that this always brings up for a lot of us around, we're in the business of public education. Should we be doing this anyway? Like, why are there fees anyway? And I think that extends to things, like, are we not, I mean, we just talked about school discretionary budgets that have rollover. So, and we talked about, Chief Markham was very clear about the belief that we have that we are appropriately funding our classrooms for the materials that they need. And so I think there are questions that we need to be asking as a district around APs, around outdoor education, around, I think we all agree conceptually that if something is part of core programming, right, that is core requirements for graduation, there ought not to be a fee for that. And so I think then it begs those questions when it comes to AP tests, when it comes to outdoor education, are those core program commitments? And if so, why is this? I just think we got to grapple with those things. And I think these questions, maybe similar to athletics, open up some really big conversations about who we are and what is core to what we do. And to what extent is our commitment to these programs like AP, like outdoor education.
And I would say especially the AP, because the way counselors are going to be talking to students are, you should be taking this AP class. And if the counselor is suggesting that the student be taking that, then I think we do need to look at that as where's the cost basis. And especially if we're looking at our FRL, saying pretty much those are being covered in all other areas, but not this. And I don't know if we can make a change to this at this point for next year coming up.
Yeah, can we update the language then to reflect that you guys will work on this next year?
We can, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
We could also just add language at the end that says this work was not completed in 23, 24. This work will be continued into 25, 26. No, we don't have to, or 24, 25.
I kind of like that for the.
Wherever I am, that way we don't have to go through and edit the whole paragraph. Everybody good with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions on this one? Are there any intervening motions to amend?
Okay. I make a
Then-
motion. Oh,
No,
go ahead,
no,
Lindsay,
go
you got it. My voice is going away anyways.
Is this a policy or what do I call it?
Student fee parameters.
I move that we adopt the student fee parameters as amended. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a motion to amend it first? So we need a motion. I can do it. I make a motion that we amend the 24-25 student fee parameters to include the edits that were completed in the document on the screen. Which generally deleted all reference to supply lists and added the extension for completion of the work noted at the bottom of the document.
My second.
Can we call the vote?
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Tytler,
Aye.
Director After,
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg.
Aye. Motion passes. The next business in order is board reports and comments. We'll begin with Director After.
Not much to report. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend the Colorado Department of Education visit this week, or the Finance Committee meeting last week. My work has been all consuming recently. I did want to call people's attention to the a new report that just came out this week from the Aspen Institute's Parachute to Aspen. I'm blanking on the name of the initiative they have, but their recent just released state of play report for the Colorado River and Roaring Fork Valley, which has some interesting findings about the the level of outdoor activity and other like sports related engagement in for our kiddos as well as RE2 and Garfield 16 and Aspen School District. So it's got some interesting stuff in there that I think is I hope people can take a look at least at the executive summary, if not the 60-page report at some point this summer.
Director Ramirez?
Thanks. I had to look at my agenda to what I've done. So I had a follow-up meeting with the Federal Relations Network to talk about our visit in September. It's gonna happen September 9th. It's gonna be a one-day visit. It's gonna be half day. We have a board finance committee scheduled right now tentatively on that day, so we might want to update that on our calendars. I'm spoken with Anna on what that day could look like, and I have a follow-up meeting next week with the committee again, just to follow up how our state board meeting went. They really want to utilize one of our school buses. They want to visit Meadowood, and they're very excited to come out here and bring all of our state and federal legislators who are gonna come and participate in that day. We also had finance committee, again, thanks to Chief Markham for all of his work from that meeting to this one on prepping those slides that really helped answer some of our initial questions, and then really dived into Director After's question on equity and how we're budgeting for that. Over the weekend and specifically on Monday, I had my town hall where we had it was in Spanish for families, and so thank you to the school district for providing interpretation for families. Thank you to Anna for being the person in the room who used the device. I think it was truly a experience for not just the families, but for us to experience what that really felt like for it to be theirs. And there were a lot of topics covered, a lot of concerns covered, a lot of experiences the family shared. And so I just want to reiterate those things that Anna shared in the beginning, that without family input, we assume what we know is happening in schools, but it really matters to hear it from their perspective, their lived experience. And then thank you again to our team for all of their leadership for the state board meeting. We had that yesterday here. It was really awesome to have the state board here to show off the district, to be able to engage with them about all of the needs that we have, and quite frankly, to hear from all the other districts on how they see us, where they're Aspen. So it was very interesting for me. But I also think it was a really good step forward in the right direction, because I think we all were able to solidify that the impact that we have on each other is real. And that it is really affecting us, whether it's teachers, recruitment, housing, all of it is playing a huge role in this. So I just really appreciated having our team lead that, be in charge of it, be present, made us look great. Thank you for that work. And it was amazing to have that experience as a board member of we had them here, we had CDE here, Susana Cordova was here to be able to look at our schools in the valley and the corridor, to see our housing project. Thank you to Ben for hosting that. It was really, I was just so proud. So thanks. I don't know how that turned into a thanks.
Director DeFreitas?
I joined Dr. Cole and Director Ramirez at the Glenwood City Council. Some other things that were on your agenda last week. to begin the conversation around shared funding with the SRO and mental health services. I think Dr. Cole put it well when she identified that these issues don't necessarily fall squarely within the parameters of either the school district or the city, but that the consequences of ignoring them will fall squarely on all of our heads, and that they are important to look for collaborative ways forward. I think that it just highlighted to me the need to continue to support Dr. Cole's work with those local governments and the communities. We fall into a rut on the school board and in education of assuming that people know what we know, and it just happens wherever you are with, and a lot of the assumptions of just how things run and why they are the way they are, specifically around funding. And I think we just need to remember that that story is not that widely known outside of education circles about what we're looking at with a lot of the budget constraints we just discussed earlier. And so I think that I'm looking forward to continuing to support that work with those local government stakeholders, and especially working with the county to recognize the significant role that they can play, especially with their Department of Public Health, as it relates to what is an unquestionable mental health crisis in our youth. So I appreciated her words and her effort to build relationships and to stand up and meet people with, as I think you were identifying quite well, Dr. Cole. Last time you saw me, I was interim, and you had to remind them like, no, I'm actual superintendent. Again, just those relationship pieces are so important. I think you did a fantastic job, and I appreciated being there with you. And I hope I didn't make your job any harder.
Director Tyler?
I'll start with the BOCES board. We've been meeting every month with a group here at the district, trying to figure out what it is that we're wanting from BOCES and to put me in a position to be able to represent us at our BOCES meetings. We just passed our budget for BOCES after asking them to come back with some more detailed numbers for us. And so we've also trying to work with them on getting them to help us with our enrollment and try to make sure that we're recognizing when enrollment is necessary and making sure that we're approving that enrollment. And then next in 2 weeks is going to be a retreat for BOCES in which a bunch of different issues and thoughts are going to be discussed. And so that'll be in a couple of weeks, and we'll be able to have a recap on that. The other one that I wanted to recap is last week at our Meadowood meeting. We talked about budget a little bit and what's happening with the budget of our building. And first of all, it's going really well. There's two different contingencies that we have within our building. There's an owner's contingency that is our contingency for other things that we would want or need to pay for. And then there's a builder's contingency. And the builder's contingency is where they're taking money out from when something unexpected happens along the way. There's a very positive builder's contingency at this point. It seems like there will be most probably some kind of refund coming back to us from the building contingency. And there was talk about a letter being written that they're looking at refunding at this point and saying that your owner's contingency that you have on this project, you can earmark for other areas that owner's contingency that we've been holding on to up until this point should be able to be released to us. So that's great news. They've done a great job of keeping on pace and on budget.
Thank you. I feel like this happens to me every time, but I can't think of anything specific that I need to report out. Well, I also feel like I've devoted a fair amount of time to outside of this meeting. So if I'm missing something, Dr. Cole, from our meetings, let me know. But I haven't had any other committee meetings in the last couple of weeks since we met. So I really appreciate everybody that was able to participate this week with the state board. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be there. So we'll now move on to board appreciations. We'll start with Director Ramirez. If you have anything else to say, I know your report turned into an appreciation.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I want to appreciate the students who showed up at the town hall. I think that as parents, we have a lived experience within our schools, and as board members, we have an experience in the schools, but I think there was something special about having student voice and student experience at the town hall. I think it takes a lot to have your mom sort of corner you and bring you along and sort of force you to share your experience. But I also think that just having students being able to share, whether it was an alumni experience, a sister experience, or like a current experience, like it was so interesting to me. And I just appreciated the courage and the vulnerability of those students, who were willing to share. And, I just want to again give thanks to our team, everyone at the DO who put out snacks, put out caffeine, everyone who helped it be a success. And I really just can't thank our team enough for that opportunity. And I look forward to hosting the Federal Relations Network and CASB and all of the delegation in September. Because I think now we know that we can do these type of things, and I hope we do it more often.
Dr. DeFreitas?
I want to appreciate all of the organizations that are putting together childcare over the summer. A lot of local ones have stepped up this year. I'm finding personally far more options for my kids than have been there in the past. And I know that some of that comes from just people who have a really deep passion for providing that care for children. So that's my appreciation is for all those groups.
Dr. Tyler?
I would like to appreciate teachers who, many of whom are on their summer break, but a lot of them also who are taking classes for continuing education. I know there's lots of classes that have been going on throughout the district. I know there's a big cohort of people who went over to Western in Gunnison, and just to all those who are continuing to educate themselves and make themselves better teachers. Thank you.
Director After?
I don't have anything else to add tonight.
And I would like to, it's Pride Month, so I would like to appreciate everyone within our schools and all the local organizations that help to make our schools a safe and welcoming space for all of our students, staff, and families. And specifically PFLAG for all the work that they've done and the advocacy that they've done. In the past year, we've spent, I guess, has it been a year? Almost a year ago. It's about a year ago. We had a number of doctors show up. We had clergy members show up. We just had so many supportive voices. And so just thanking them for their support and communities up and down the valley and the meaningful work that they do for our students and families and staff. Okay. One more item. The next business in order is an executive session pursuant to section 24-6, 4024A, CRS, for the purpose of discussing the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest, specifically the potential purchase of real property for the purpose of employee housing. Do I have a motion to move into executive session?
I make a motion to move into executive session.
I move that the Board of Education move into executive session pursuant to section, we need to say all that, huh? 24-6-4024A CRS for the purpose of discussing the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest, specifically the potential purchase of real property for the purpose of employee housing.
Can you please invite
Inviting
our COO and our superintendent?
Inviting Superintendent Nicole and Chief Operating Officer Ben Baumfang.
I have a second.
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 The board will now move into executive session, inviting Chief Baumfang and Chief Mark. All right, we need to remove into executive session. Chief Markham, are you joining us in executive session? Okay, we need to remove into executive session, inviting all three.
Okay. So reading the whole thing again.
I can read it. I move that the Board of Education move into executive session pursuant to section 24-6, 4024A CRS for the purpose of discussing the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest, specifically the potential purchase of real property for the purpose of employee housing, inviting Chief Baumfang, Chief Markham, and Dr. Cole. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 The board will now move into executive session. The time is 8:08 p.m. If there is no objection and no further business, this meeting will be adjourned. It's 8:51 PM.